In the small riverine village of Umudioka, life was simple, and the people were content. The river gave them everything they needed, filling their nets with fish each day and helping the villagers make a living. Fishing was the heart of Umudioka. Every morning, the men would head out to the river, knowing that the water would provide enough for their families and the market. Among the fishermen were two brothers, Obi and Chuka. Obi, the elder brother, was respected by everyone in the village. He was wise and steady, always knowing the right thing to say or do. People trusted Obi because he was calm and dependable, never one to act without thinking. His strong arms and broad shoulders showed the years he'd spent fishing, pulling in nets, and rowing through the water. Obi's quiet nature made people feel safe, and he was seen as a pillar of strength in the village. Chuka, the younger brother, was different. He was full of energy and always had a spark in his eye. Chuka was known for his charm and his restlessness. He wasn't satisfied with just the simple life of fishing. He dreamed of more. He wanted wealth and adventure, things that he felt went beyond the small shores of Umudioka. But his skill in fishing was undeniable. He had sharp eyes that could spot fish from a distance, and he handled the nets as if he'd been born to do it. The young women in the village couldn't help but notice him. With his six-pack abs, bright smile, and smooth words, Chuka made them blush whenever he walked by. And he would smile back at them courtly because he was already engaged. Chuka was engaged to a kind young woman named Amaka. She was excited about their upcoming marriage, looking forward to building a life together. Amaka loved Chuka deeply and often daydreamed about the happy home they would make. But lately, she had started to feel a distance growing between them. Chuka seemed to be thinking of something else, and Amaka worried that his dreams of wealth and adventure were taking him away from her. Each morning, the brothers would gather their nets and set out on the river, working side by side in perfect rhythm. Together, they brought in large catches, making them well respected in the village. Obi's steady hand balanced Chuka's eagerness, and everyone saw them as a perfect team. But as they worked together, Chuka's mind often wandered. He was grateful for the life he had, but he couldn't help feeling that there was more waiting for him out there. Something beyond the river, beyond the simple life of Umudioka. And as that feeling grew, so did the space between him and the people he loved. Amaka noticed it more each day, and though she tried to keep hope alive in her heart, she couldn't help but wonder if Chuka's restless dreams would one day carry him far away from her. One misty morning before the sun had risen fully over Umudioka, Chuka and Obi set out on the river as usual. The village was still quiet, and the only sounds were the gentle splash of their paddles and the soft calls of birds waking in the trees. The river was calm, and the brothers moved through the water with ease, ready for another day of fishing. Chuka rowed with his usual energy, but his mind wandered. He thought of all the things he wanted: adventure, wealth, and something more than the daily rhythm of fishing. Obi, who knew his brother well, could see the look in his eyes. "Your head is in the clouds again, isn't it?" Obi asked with a small smile. Chuka grinned, shrugging. "Maybe. Don't you ever think about what else is out there beyond this river?" Obi chuckled, shaking his head. "The river is enough for me. It gives us everything we need. You know that, Chuka." Chuka didn't reply, but his thoughts continued to drift. Suddenly he heard something faint, a soft, sweet sound that seemed to float over the water. It was like a song, gentle and beautiful, and it sent a strange feeling through him. "Do you hear that, Obi?" he whispered, his eyes scanning the water. Obi stopped paddling and listened, his brow furrowing. "It's probably just the wind," he said, but even he looked a little uncertain. "No, it's not the wind," Chuka insisted. "It sounds like someone singing." Curious and drawn to the sound, Chuka started paddling towards it, ignoring Obi's cautious look. The further they rowed, the clearer the song became. It was unlike anything they had ever heard, soft, mysterious, and beautiful, like the river itself was singing to them. As they moved closer to the source of the sound, they spotted something unusual in the water up ahead. There, tangled in a thick patch of river plants, was a figure. Her skin glistened in the morning light, and as they approached, they could see that she wasn't like any person they had ever met. It was a woman. but she had scales that shimmered on her skin, and instead of legs, she had a long, shining tail. Her eyes were bright and large, looking up at them with a mix of hope and worry. "Please," she said, her voice as soft as her song, "help me." Chuka was completely captivated. He had heard stories of mermaids, but he never believed them until now. He could barely speak, staring at the beautiful creature caught in front of him. She was unlike anything he'd ever seen, and his heart pounded with excitement. Obi, on the other hand, was more cautious. He grabbed Chuka's arm, whispering, "We don't know who or what she is. This could be dangerous." Chuka shook off his brother's grip, determined to help. "She needs us, Obi. Look at her. She's stuck." Ignoring Obi's warnings, Chuka moved closer and began to carefully pull the plants away from her tail. The mermaid winced as he untangled the last bit of the thick river plants, but soon she was free. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with relief. "I am Adaora." Chuka smiled, unable to hide his admiration. "I'm Chuka, and this is my brother, Obi." Adaora nodded at Obi, but her gaze lingered on Chuka as if she was just as captivated by him as he was by her. "I don't know how to repay you," she said softly. "You saved me." Chuka felt his cheeks warm, though he tried to stay calm. "You don't have to repay us. We were just passing by." But Adaora shook her head, reaching out her hand. In it she held a small, shining shell. "Take this," she said, offering it to Chuka. "It's a small gift, but I will not forget your kindness." Chuka took the shell, feeling a strange thrill run through him as he touched it. "Thank you, Adaora," he said, trying not to show how excited he felt. With a final grateful look, Adaora slipped back into the water, disappearing beneath the surface as if she were part of the river itself. Chuka stared after her, still feeling the thrill of the strange encounter. As they rowed back to shore, Obi looked at Chuka with concern. "This is not something to play with, Chuka. She is no ordinary woman." Chuka shrugged, clutching the shell in his hand. "I know, but she needed our help. And besides, when else would we meet someone like her?" Obi sighed, knowing his brother's restless spirit was already stirring with new ideas. "Just be careful. Not everything from the river is as kind as it seems." But Chuka barely heard him. He couldn't stop thinking about Adaora, the beautiful mermaid with the haunting song and the mysterious smile. As they returned to the village that day, he couldn't help but feel that his life was about to change in ways he never could have imagined. The days passed, but Chuka's mind remained fixed on the encounter with Adaora. He tried to go about his usual routine, fishing with Obi each morning, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the river and the mysterious mermaid. Her face, her voice, the way she had looked at him, it all haunted him, pulling him back to the water like a magnet. One evening, when the sun was just beginning to set and the village was winding down for the night, Chuka quietly left his hut and headed to the riverbank alone. He felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, unsure if he would see her again, but hoping with all his heart that he would. As he reached the edge of the water, he sat down and waited, listening to the gentle sound of the river flowing. For a moment, he felt foolish. Maybe she wouldn't return. Maybe it had all been a one-time meeting. But just as he was about to give up and turn back, he heard that familiar, soft, beautiful voice drifting over the water. His heart leaped, and he looked out to see Adaora swimming toward him. Her tail shimmered under the fading light, and her large, bright eyes fixed on him with a warm look that made his heart race. "You came back," he whispered, unable to hide his happiness. Adaora smiled, her face lighting up. "I felt that you would be here. Something told me you would wait." They talked for hours as the sun set and the stars began to shine above them. Adaora told him about her life in the river, how she and her sisters spent their days exploring the waters, and how she had been warned never to get close to humans. But she said there was something different about him, something that made her feel safe. Chuka felt the same. He couldn't explain it, but he was drawn to her like nothing he'd ever felt before. She was more than beautiful. There was something magical about her that made him feel alive, as if the world was brighter and more exciting just by being near her. As they spoke, Adaora reached out and took his hand. Her touch was soft and cool, and Chuka felt a shiver run through him. "You saved me," she said. I won't forget it. Chuka blushed, squeezing her hand gently. I'd do it again. I don't know why, but it feels like I was meant to meet you. They continued meeting like this every evening, talking by the river's edge, sharing stories and laughter. Soon, Chuka became so engrossed in these meetings that he started to ignore his duties. He woke up later each morning, barely keeping up with the fishing trips with Obi. His mind was always on Udara, and he found himself distracted, dreaming of the next time he would see her. Obi noticed the change in his brother. Chuka, once full of energy and excitement for each fishing day, now seemed tired and distant, his thoughts elsewhere. One morning, as they paddled out on the river, Obi finally spoke up. Chuka, you've been acting strange lately. You're hardly around in the evenings, and during the day, you're different. What's going on? Chuka shrugged, trying to brush it off. Nothing, Obi. I've just had a lot on my mind. But Obi wasn't convinced. This isn't like you, brother. Whatever it is, remember that we're a team. We've always been. I don't want anything coming between us. Chuka forced a smile. Of course, Obi. You know I'll always be here with you. But deep down he knew his heart was drifting further and further away from the village, from his life with Obi, and even from his fiancée Amaka. Though he tried to tell himself that it was just a small distraction, he couldn't deny the pull Udara had over him. As the weeks passed, their meetings became even more intimate. Udara began to bring gifts from the river, shimmering pearls, small sparkling stones, and even rare shells. Chuka accepted each gift, enchanted by the magic of it all. He felt that these treasures were more valuable than anything he could find in Umudioka, more exciting than his simple life as a fisherman. And unknown to him, this new bond was beginning to spread whispers among Udara's friends. Some of them had seen her meeting with the human, and they grew curious, envious even. They too began to wonder what it would be like to know the human, to receive his smile, his laughter. And as they watched from afar, their own feelings began to stir, setting the stage for a rivalry that would soon test Chuka's heart in ways he couldn't have imagined. Every evening, as the sky turned golden and the river grew quiet, Chuka found himself drawn back to the water's edge, eager for his secret meetings. At first it was only Udara he would meet there. She would wait for him, her eyes lighting up as he approached, her voice gentle as she told him about the mysteries of the river. They talked, laughed, and slowly grew closer, sharing moments that made Chuka feel he was living a dream. But as the days went by, Chuka's life grew even more tangled when Udara introduced him to her friends. Ngozi and Ezine were just as enchanting as Udara, each one a unique beauty in her own way. After that first introduction, Chuka started meeting each mermaid separately, savoring the thrill of these secret encounters. Each night he would tell one mermaid he needed to rest, only to slip away and spend the night with another by the river's edge. He began to see Udara, Ngozi, and Ezine each in turn, carefully keeping them unaware of one another. The thrill of this hidden life took over his days and nights, and soon he found himself slipping deeper into a web of secrets he could barely keep straight. Ngozi was bold and playful, always laughing and teasing Chuka, urging him to forget about Udara. "You know I could make you happier than Udara ever could," she would say, her eyes twinkling as she pressed close to him, her voice soft and tempting. She would bring him shimmering river stones, draping them over his neck as she whispered promises that made him feel he was the most important person in her world. Ezine, on the other hand, was quiet and mysterious. She rarely spoke, but watched him with an intensity that left Chuka feeling breathless. One evening, as they sat close by the water, she took his hand in hers and murmured, "Why waste your time with Udara when I could be yours?" Her eyes held him in a spell, and before he knew it, he was agreeing to meet her alone, away from the others. Unaware of each other's presence in his life, each mermaid tried to make Chuka hers alone. They each thought they were his only love, whispering sweet promises in his ear and bringing him gifts from the depths of the river. And each time Chuka's desire grew, his heart racing as he kept these secret relationships alive, basking in the attention and the treasures they gave him. The nights spent by the river grew more intimate as Chuka and each mermaid grew closer. When the moon was high, Udara, Ngozi, and Ezine would transform into a form that allowed them to move like humans. Their tails were gone, replaced by legs that let them walk along the riverbank with him. Those nights, under the stars, Chuka and the mermaids would share moments of closeness that bound him even more to their world. Each mermaid, feeling that she alone held his heart, would spend hours with him. Chuka no longer felt any guilt about his fiancée, Amaka, or the life he was slowly leaving behind in the village. The thrill of having not just one but 3 beautiful mermaids in his life had taken hold of him, making him feel invincible. Each gift they gave him, the pearls, the shells, the sparkling stones, felt like proof of his charm, his power over these magical creatures. In his mind, he had found something greater than any life Umudioka could offer. Back in Umudioka, his absence did not go unnoticed. Amaka grew increasingly worried, sensing that Chuka was slipping away from her. She tried to talk to him, hoping to understand what was on his mind. But he brushed her off each time, making excuses about long fishing trips or needing time alone. Obi, too, was troubled, watching his brother disappear into his own world. But Chuka didn't care. He felt as if he had discovered something magical, something no one else in the village would ever understand. The river held mysteries, and he had become part of them. As he spent more time with Udara, Ngozi, and Ezine, he felt himself falling deeper into a world he had never imagined. Soon, he stopped going out to fish entirely, spending his days daydreaming about the evenings by the river. He began to avoid his duties, ignoring the calls of his friends and family, and distancing himself from the people who loved him. His life had become a series of secret meetings, hidden treasures, and whispered promises by the water's edge. In the dark, as he held each mermaid close, he felt like the luckiest man alive. But with every passing night, he was slipping deeper into a world of secrets, unaware of the storm that was quietly brewing around him. Chuka's life had changed entirely. Gone was the humble fisherman who once toiled in the early morning light, casting nets and pulling in the day's catch with his brother. Now he was a man of wealth and pride, dressed in the finest clothes and known throughout the village for the treasures he possessed. His home sparkled with rare pearls, shimmering shells, and stones that glistened under the sun. All of these gifts had come from his secret relationships with the mermaids, and he had no intention of stopping. Each night, Chuka would meet with Adaora, Ngozi, or Ezine by the river, luring them in with his charm and his words. They showered him with more gifts than he could ever need, bringing him treasures from the deepest parts of the river, things no human had ever seen. Each gift was more extravagant than the last, and Chuka's wealth grew beyond anything he'd ever imagined. As his riches piled up, so did his pride. Chuka would walk through the village with his head held high, barely acknowledging anyone who passed by. He had begun to see himself as better than the other villagers, flaunting his wealth openly, as if daring anyone to question him. "Why should I suffer to fish when I can collect countless treasures from the mermaids?" he would think to himself, smirking. "All I have to do is charm them, and they'll give me anything I want." He laughed at the thought of the hard work he used to do, of the days spent sweating under the sun with nets and paddles. Now he barely lifted a finger. He had stopped joining Obi for their daily fishing trips entirely, leaving his brother to do all the work alone. Obi's disappointment and frustration grew each day, but no matter how many times he tried to speak with Chuka, his words fell on deaf ears. "Chuka, we were happy before all this," Obi would say. "The life we had wasn't rich, but it was good. Can't you see what you're losing?" Chuka would wave him off, laughing. "Losing? I'm gaining more than you could ever imagine, Obi. You're the one wasting time on fishing when there's a fortune waiting for us. You should be thanking me." But it wasn't just Obi who felt Chuka's absence. Amaka, his fiancée, had waited patiently for him, hoping that his strange behavior was just a phase. She believed that he would come back to her, that the Chuka she had known and loved would return. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, her hope began to fade. Chuka barely spoke to her anymore, his visits becoming brief and distant. When they did cross paths, he would barely look at her, as if she were just another face in the village. The laughter and warmth he used to share with her were gone, replaced by cold indifference. Amaka's heart was shattered. She couldn't understand what had happened to the man she had loved. the man she had planned to spend her life with. She cried herself to sleep many nights, praying that Chuka would return to his senses, but with each passing day, he seemed to drift further away, lost in the riches and the power that his new life had given him. Yet, despite her pain, Amaka's spirit remained strong. She continued to help her family, working in the village and doing her best to move forward. Her kindness didn't go unnoticed. Among the villagers was a young warrior named Ekene. Strong, disciplined, and respected, Ekene was known for his bravery and dedication to the village. He noticed Amaka's sadness and over time began to admire her quiet strength. Ekene approached Amaka one day, offering her a kind smile. "You deserve to be treated with love and respect," he said gently. "If someone cannot see your worth, then perhaps they are the one who is blind." Amaka looked up, surprised by the warmth in his words. She saw in Ekene's eyes a genuine kindness, something she had missed in Chuka for so long. Slowly, as days passed, Amaka began to see Ekene as more than just a friend. His presence brought her comfort, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a spark of happiness. Meanwhile, Chuka's greed continued to grow. His heart was set on one thing: more wealth. No amount of treasure seemed enough. He wanted more pearls, more stones, more riches to add to his collection. He even began thinking of new ways to charm the mermaids, coming up with sweet words and promises to keep them captivated. "They adore me and want my manhood," he thought, grinning to himself. "Why shouldn't I take advantage of it? They'll give me anything I want, and I'll be the richest man in all of Umudioka." He no longer cared about the consequences, ignoring the warnings his brother had given him, ignoring the pain he had caused Amaka. In his mind, the mermaids were nothing more than a way to get what he wanted, and he used his charm and allure to get as much from them as he could. But as Chuka's greed grew, so did the restlessness in the river. The once peaceful waters began to stir, as if sensing the imbalance Chuka was creating. The villagers noticed strange changes in the river, small disturbances that seemed to hint at something deeper, but Chuka, blinded by his pride and wealth, paid no attention. All he could see were the riches, the endless flow of treasures that came to him, all for the taking. Little did he know that his actions were setting forces in motion, forces that would soon bring consequences he could never have imagined. Chuka's life had become a complex web of secrets and desires. He had gone from meeting each mermaid in secret to building intense relationships with Udara, Ngozi, and Ezine, each of them convinced that she alone held his heart. Every night he would slip away from the village, meeting one of them by the river and sharing whispered promises and passionate embraces under the moonlight. Each mermaid thought she was special, that she was the only one blessed to bear Chuka's love. But the enchantment Chuka had woven was about to unravel. Over time, each mermaid began to notice changes in her body, a warmth, a gentle stirring that signaled new life. They had all begun to carry Chuka's child. At first, each one kept this secret close, convinced that it would finally secure Chuka's loyalty. They dreamed of a future with him, believing that their bond was unique and unbreakable. One night, Udara came to the river with excitement in her eyes, ready to share her secret with Chuka. She had imagined his joy and hoped he would stay with her forever. But as she waited, Ngozi appeared, her face showing the same excitement and anticipation. "What are you doing here, Ngozi?" Udara asked, her voice uncertain. Ngozi's smile faded, and she crossed her arms. "I could ask you the same question. I came here to see Chuka. He belongs to me." Udara's heart sank. "Belongs to you?" she whispered, her voice filled with confusion. "Chuka is mine. We're going to have a child together." The words hung in the air, and Ngozi's face went pale. "A child," she whispered, her voice trembling with shock. "Chuka is going to have my child." As they stood there, the truth began to dawn on them. Both of them had been deceived, believing they were the only ones carrying Chuka's child. Hurt and betrayal filled their hearts. But before they could speak, Ezine emerged from the shadows, her face a mirror of their own pain. "He promised me everything," Ezine whispered, her voice broken. "I'm also expecting his child." The three mermaids stared at each other, a mix of shock, anger, and despair clouding their faces. The river, sensing their turmoil, began to stir, its once gentle waves turning rough, the water thrashing against the shore. Their voices rose and their tears fell like raindrops, each one mourning the love they thought was only theirs. Udara clenched her fists, her voice shaking with anger. "Chuka betrayed us all. He played with our hearts and used us for his own gain." Ngozi's face twisted with jealousy. "I trusted him. I thought I was the only one. How dare he lie to us?" Ezine's quiet nature gave way to rage, her eyes blazing. "If he thinks he can betray us and go unpunished, he is wrong." Their jealousy and heartbreak turned the peaceful river into a chaotic whirlpool, the waves crashing with a force that hadn't been felt in years. The ocean itself seemed to respond, sensing the mermaids' pain and anger. The once calm waters grew turbulent, sending ripples of unrest throughout the entire river and far into the sea. This disturbance did not go unnoticed. In the deepest part of the ocean, Queen Udara, the powerful and wise ruler of the seas, sensed the discord spreading through her waters. She was the protector of all her daughters, and she had seen Chuka's greed and deceit for some time. Now, the cries of Udara, Ngozi, and Ezine had reached her, echoing their heartbreak and betrayal. Queen Udara's heart filled with fury, and she rose from the depths, swimming swiftly to the river's edge. Her arrival was like a storm, the water parting around her as she emerged, her presence commanding and fierce. As Queen Udara reached the shore, the mermaids fell silent, their anger turning to awe and fear in the face of their queen. Chuka, who had been waiting by the river for yet another secret meeting, froze as he saw her, a sense of dread washing over him. Queen Udara's voice was like thunder as she addressed him. "Chuka, you have brought chaos and heartbreak to my waters. You have used my daughters, taking their love and trust and twisting it for your own gain. Do you know the pain you have caused?" Chuka stammered, struggling to find words. I didn't mean to. Queen Udara cut him off, her gaze fierce. "You did this knowingly, blinded by greed and pride. You abandoned your own people, cast aside those who cared for you, all for the wealth and gifts of the sea. You sought riches and power, and now you must face the consequences of your actions." Udara, Ngozi, and Ezine stood by, their eyes full of hurt and anger, each one feeling the weight of Chuka's betrayal. They had loved him, believed in his promises, and now they saw him for who he truly was, a man consumed by his own selfish desires. In a last attempt to save his brother, Obi stepped forward, bowing low before Queen Udara. "Please, Your Majesty, forgive him. Chuka is my brother, and though he has lost his way, he did not mean to bring harm." Queen Udara's gaze softened as she looked at Obi, sensing the sincerity in his plea. "Obi, you are a true brother, loyal and kind. You deserve none of the shame that Chuka has brought upon your family." Turning back to Chuka, her face hardened once more. But Chuka's betrayal cannot go unpunished. He has left a trail of pain, and he must pay the price. The three mermaids, each carrying his child, stood close, their faces filled with sorrow and anger. Queen Udara looked at them with a deep sadness, speaking gently but firmly. "To my daughters, I offer this mercy. You will return to the sea, and your children will be raised with love and care. They will be blessed, even if their father has failed them. But Chuka shall never see them. His greed and arrogance have cost him that right." Obi's head hung low as he listened, feeling the weight of his brother's actions. Chuka, for the first time, truly felt the sting of regret, his heart heavy with shame. He tried to speak, to beg for forgiveness, but Queen Udara held up her hand. "Chuka, you have taken the gifts of the sea and turned them into instruments of greed. You will be cut off from the river, from the ocean, and from the love you once knew. Your wealth will vanish, and you will be left with nothing but the emptiness you created." With a final, commanding gesture, Queen Udara spoke the words of her curse, binding Chuka to a life of isolation and regret. His riches, once so precious to him, began to fade before his eyes, the pearls and treasures turning to dust. The three mermaids looked at him one last time, their faces a mix of sorrow and finality. Udara, with tears in her eyes, whispered, "You could have been so much more, Chuka, but your heart was filled with greed." As Queen Udara and the mermaids disappeared into the depths, the river calmed, the waters returning to their gentle flow, as if erasing all traces of Chuka's betrayal. Chuka was left alone on the shore, his wealth gone, his heart empty, and his once promising future shattered by his own choices. And though he had once believed he could take on the world, he now stood as a man broken, the pain of his actions echoing in the quiet of the river, a reminder of the life he had thrown away. Obi, watching his brother with a heavy heart, took one last look at him before turning away. The river had reclaimed its peace, and with it, Chuka's life was left in silence, a warning to all who would dare to let greed and pride guide their hearts. Stripped of his wealth, pride, and the magical gifts that once surrounded him, Chuka returned to the village of Umudioka as a broken man. The treasures he had collected, the gifts from the mermaids, had all disappeared like a mist, leaving him with nothing but his shame. He walked through the village quietly, his head bowed, avoiding the curious stares and whispers of the people he had once looked down upon. Once, he had flaunted his wealth and turned away from his loved ones, believing himself too important, too powerful to care about anyone but himself. But now, as he stepped back into the simple life of Umudioka, he could feel the emptiness that his greed and pride had created. The hardest blow of all was when he saw Amaka. She had once been his fiancée, the woman who had loved him unconditionally, waiting patiently while he ignored her, certain that he would one day come to his senses. But that day had never come, and as his neglect turned to betrayal, Amaka had finally given up. She had found love again, this time with Ekeni, the strong and honorable warrior who had always respected her and valued her heart. Chuka saw them together in the marketplace, Ekeni's hand resting protectively on Amaka's shoulder as they laughed together. She looked happier than he had ever seen her, and it struck him deeply. The love he had taken for granted was now beyond his reach, and he knew there was no forgiveness to be found. Amaka had moved on, and her new life was something he could never be a part of. With nothing left to his name, Chuka was forced to return to the hard work he had once scorned. He went back to fishing, casting nets in the early mornings and working under the hot sun, trying to earn a living the honest way. The hands that had once received treasures without effort were now calloused and sore from pulling heavy nets, hauling fish from the river as he had done before his life had spiraled out of control. As he struggled to make ends meet, he could not help but think of the choices that had led him to this point. He had believed his charm and his manhood would bring him endless wealth, that he could live without effort, taking from the mermaids without giving anything in return. But he had been wrong. His pride had blinded him, and now he had nothing but his own mistakes to keep him company. At night, as he lay alone, Chuka was haunted by memories of Adaora, Ngozi, and Ezine, and wondered about his children. He remembered their trust, the gifts they had showered upon him, and the promises he had made, only to betray them all. He saw their faces, their hurt, and the anger in their eyes, and he knew he had shattered something precious. The guilt weighed on him like a heavy stone, pressing down on him even as he tried to sleep. Chuka's story soon became known throughout the village. People spoke of him in hushed voices, sharing his tale as a warning to others. Obi, his wise and loyal brother, took it upon himself to pass down Chuka's story to the younger generations. He gathered the children of the village and told them of his brother's rise and fall, sparing no detail. "Remember," Obi would say, "the choices you make will follow you. Greed will always lead to destruction, and pride will leave you alone. The world may offer you treasures, but they mean nothing if you do not earn them with respect and hard work." The children would listen, their eyes wide as they took in the tale of Chuka, the man who had everything and lost it all. Obi would emphasize the importance of integrity, of caring for those who love you and valuing the simple life the village offered. He spoke of the river, reminding them that while it provided for them, it must also be respected, for its gifts were not to be taken lightly. Over time, Chuka became a symbol in the village, a reminder of the dangers of greed and betrayal. People would say his name with a mix of pity and caution, telling each other that his downfall had been his own doing, a lesson to never take what you have for granted. As the years went by, Chuka continued to live in Umudioka, a shadow of the man he had once been. He worked quietly, keeping to himself, never again seeking the riches or attention that had once defined his life. Though he was still a strong man, he walked with a heaviness that showed the burden he carried, a burden only he could understand. In the end, Chuka's story became a tale of regret, a warning for those who might one day be tempted by pride or blinded by wealth. His life was a reminder of the power of choices, the importance of responsibility, and the need to honor the people who care for you. The river continued to flow, and life went on, but the memory of Chuka's actions remained, a legacy of what happens when one forgets the value of humility, loyalty, and hard work.